So good morning, everybody. This is our philosophy yoga class. You can stay right where you are as we set up today's practice. Today, I thought we'd talk about Kundalini. I don't know if this is a word that you've ever heard in your yoga journey. Actually, it's a branch of yoga, Kundalini, and maybe you've taken a Kundalini yoga class. I'm not a Kundalini yoga teacher, so you've never taken one from me. But Kundalini yoga teachers usually dress differently. They usually wear all white with a white turban. And the branch of yoga that we now call Kundalini yoga actually is more closely aligned with a different place from India. And it's more closely aligned with the Sikh religion. Traditional yoga that I teach grew up alongside Hinduism. It's not part of the Hindu religion, but it's more, there's more, the language is shared, and there are more images and deities that are shared with Hinduism, whereas the Kundalini branch of yoga is more aligned with Sikhism. So it's a different language. When you chant in Kundalini yoga, it's a different language than it is in classical yoga, and the postures are called differently, and some of the deities and some of the philosophical concepts are more closely aligned with a different branch of the religious landscape. So what is Kundalini then? It's not necessarily that particular branch of yoga. That particular branch of yoga is very comprehensive. It's very physically challenging sometimes. There's a lot of movement. It almost looks like aerobic exercise sometimes, very focused on cleansing and clearing, a lot of chanting, a lot of devotional aspects to that practice. It's beautiful, extremely powerful. I think Kundalini yoga is really like high impact for if you really want to get places fast. But what does Kundalini mean? It's actually a concept that comes up across all different styles of yoga. And Kundalini refers to the coiled or untapped resource of power at the root of your spine. It's often visualized as a serpent. And just because this untapped power, it's sleeping, it's coiled, it's stored, kind of like a snake hiding in the grass or hiding in its lair. And it's not until there's some reason that the snake will start to coil up and you'll see the power of it. Otherwise, you might not ever notice it or ever know it's there. So I think that's why they made that kind of metaphor of the coiled snake. So this resource, or this huge reservoir of natural energy, is thought to be stored at the base of the spine. The practices of yoga, not just Kundalini style yoga, but the practices of yoga are thought to stimulate the Kundalini and encourage it to rise up the spine. Eventually, the Kundalini rises and merges with the crown of the head, the energy at the crown of the head, and which we kind of know from our philosophical studies in yoga. This is the connection to the universal energy, or divine energy. So once that Kundalini makes its way up the spine, connects with the crown, now you have that direct plug-in to that universal energy. And there's all kinds of talk in yoga about how to bring that Kundalini energy up, when it's safe to do so, and what it's going to feel like when it happens. Generally, for most of us, we're kind of known as householders in the yoga world because we have regular lives. We don't live on a mountaintop in the Himalayas. We eat regular food and just do regular stuff. So we're householders. For most of us, we're probably not going to have that huge explosive experience of Kundalini rising. I mean, it can happen spontaneously, and I have met people who talk about it. But for us today, I kind of wanted to talk about what does yoga have to offer to stimulate the Kundalini, which is that sleepy reservoir of power at the base of the spine. So I want to really focus on the root chakra today, because that's thought to be the area where this Kundalini is stored. And we're going to work on kind of bringing that sleeping serpent to life with some movement, some breath work, some intention. But keep in mind, even though we're talking a lot about the Kundalini rising, in tantric yoga, which is a branch of yoga that's a bit separate from Kundalini yoga, tantric philosophy heavily influences what I teach. In tantric yoga, we also recognize that we are embodied and connected to the earth. So the rising of the Kundalini up the spine is really important, but so is bringing it back down so that your body stays plugged in and your body stays enlightened as well. It's not a matter of ignoring the body. So keep in mind that we're taking a tantric approach to Kundalini rising. So I'm going to come over to my mat and invite you to lie down on your back with your knees bent. I just want to bring our spine to as neutral a position as possible. You might notice that I have a folded blanket here just to cushion my spine as I lie on the floor. We're just going to do a little tour of the body briefly to kind of get a physical connection and a visceral connection to the areas that we're thinking about today, to the path of the Kundalini as the yogi philosophers imagined it. So start by coming to a comfortable reclined position, your feet positioned wherever they're comfortable. They don't have to be in a particular spot. Try to bring ease to your knees, hips, low back, shoulders. And feel your bones settle towards gravity. Sense the density of your body, your physicalness. And this is nothing to shun or be embarrassed about. The physicalness of your body is a manifestation of the elements of earth and perhaps water as well. And the physicalness of your body allows you to express your divinity. So embrace your physicality, feel your density, and connect to the force of gravity and plug into the energy of the earth. And then begin to notice your spine. You can draw awareness, if you like, to the area of the tailbone and the sitting bones, the pubis symphysis, which is where the two halves of your pelvis bones connect at the front. And notice how that kind of connection of bones, that collection of bones, the tailbone, the two sitting bones, the pubis symphysis, creates almost like a little diamond shape. And imagine, if you can, all of the muscles and connective tissue that sling amongst the bones from side to side and back and front. And this sort of elastic, flexible pelvic floor creates the basement for this whole spinal column. The spinal column that moves up in front of your sacrum and through the vertebral column, through the middle back and upper back, neck, right up to the brain, and finally to the crown of the head. So maybe while we're here, we can use our breath and the movements of breath to draw awareness to this central channel. This is the pathway of the Kundalini. Can you imagine that you're inhaling through the crown of your head? I know you don't really, but imagine the energy of the inhale coming in through the crown of the head, moving down that tube in the center of your body to the pelvic floor. And then as you exhale, just like bouncing on a trampoline, the breath bounces back up and comes out the crown of the head. So imagining the energy of the breath sweeping down the spine on the inhale and rebounding back up the spine on the exhale. This bi-directional flow of energy is what animates us, what creates our unique humanity. And by focusing your attention there right now, you're really touching base with the root of who you are. Okay. Let's do a little bit more awareness here. Let's keep in our attention now in the trampoline-like pelvic floor. When we were inhaling, we were bringing the energy into the pelvic floor. And as we were exhaling a second ago, we're letting it bounce back up. Can you focus a little bit more just on that area now? Using that trampoline type imagery if it helps. And notice if there's any physical echoes of that bouncing of energy back up the spine on the exhale. What happens when you inhale, this is due to the mechanics of your breath. What happens is you inhale, there's a slight spreading or expansion of that trampoline-like pelvic floor. And then as you exhale, there is this upward lift. There is this retraction, this bouncing the energy back up towards the crown of the head. So you may feel your sitting bones widen slightly as you inhale, and your sitting bones contract towards each other slightly as you exhale. So see if you can focus on that just for one more breath. And then if you can, bring your hands over to the front of your pelvis. You'll find you've got two protruding bones at the front of your pelvis. I affectionately call them the bumper bones. Technically, they're their anterior superior iliac spine, but I like bumper bones. Let your fingers rest lightly on these protruding bones. And then notice if you can feel any movement with your breath in these bones. You may find that your bumper bones echo what your sitting bones were doing. They come together a little bit as you bounce the energy back up the spine, and then they separate or widen a bit as you receive the full energy from the breath into the pelvic floor. So there's a sense of the pelvis breathing, expanding and contracting with your energy. This is a living proof, a living connection to the philosophy of the Kundalini, rising and pulsing within your pelvic floor. We want to try, if we can, to keep a lot of awareness in the pelvic floor as we come into our postures today, and see if we can feel how our postures and our movement move this sleeping serpent and encourage it to start liberating for movement on the spine. Our first little bit of movement will be a bit of pelvic tilting. Now I'm going to take the heels of my palms now and let them rest on the bumper bones. My middle fingers or so might connect at the top of the pubis symphysis. And my thumbs, the tips of the thumbs, can form a horizontal line between the two bumper bones. So I've created a triangle like that between my hands, and the open triangle is kind of concentrating my attention and a flow of energy into the pelvis, right down towards the pelvic floor. It's kind of like when kids use a magnifying glass to intensify the rays of the sun. My fingers are kind of like that. And I'm going to go through a gentle rocking of the pelvis. As I exhale, rock the pelvis forward so that the back is flattened to the floor. And as you inhale, go into an anterior tilt so that there's a little curvature in your low back. So exhale, posterior tilt, and inhale, anterior tilt. Notice your triangular shaped hands tilting with the pelvis. Can you feel under your hands that sense of expansion on the inhale and that sense of contraction on the exhale? Now be aware of any over engagement in the buttocks muscles. That's really common, and that's going to hold back the flow of energy. So soften the gluteus muscles, soften your hamstrings and thighs. They don't have a lot to do either. Keep your breath soft and even. Keep your face soft and your shoulders relaxed. Let's just take another breath here. One more inhale, one more exhale. Really awakening the serpent at the base of the spine. Beautiful. You can let your arms relax, let your pelvis relax. Do you want to go into those breathing exercises that we did at the beginning, where you sense the energy of the breath moving down through the crown to the pelvic floor, and the exhale is like a trampoline, it rebounds it right back up to the crown of the head. Just take one more like that, keeping the channel alive and open. Okay, and then let's roll over to our side. Press up from the floor. Now the next little bit of work involves hands and knees. If you're uncomfortable being on your knees today, let me show you an alternative. You can grab your trusty chair, which we never are too far without. Bring your hands onto the wall in front of you, and you're creating the same table shape that I'm going to create on the floor, hands and knees, and follow along from here. This is going to give you feedback through your sitting bones and your pelvis and allow you to do all the movements, all the things that we need to do to awaken the Kundalini without having to put pressure on the pelvic floor. So I'm going to turn my blanket now so I have cushioning under my knees and come to table pose. Now we were just doing a little pelvic movement on our backs. I'd like to repeat that in this position. So whether you're sitting in the chair or here, take a breath or two to bring the spine into that alive and dynamic state. So inhale through the crown to the tailbone, rebound the breath back up the spine as you exhale out the crown. Good. So your spine is alive and sparkling and awake. Now do the same movement. As you inhale, create a little curvature in the low back, sitting bones spread. And as you exhale, flatten the back and hug the sitting bones closer towards each other. Try that a few times. This isn't exactly a cat-cow. I'm just moving the lower third of my spine, like when you were lying on your back. And really focusing, if possible, on the movement of the sitting bones, the flexibility of the tissues between the sitting bones, rebounding and pliant and very, very nubile, just like a trampoline would be. Maybe when you slow this right down, you sense that there's one side that moves a little easier than the other. That typically happens. Let's just take one more breath here. And then come back to a neutral position. Now I'm going to take my right leg and stretch it out to the side of the mat. If you're sitting in your chair, just sit forward in your chair a little bit so you can stretch your right leg out like I am from the chair seat. Let's repeat that same movement with one leg extended out to the side. So as you inhale, spread the sitting bones, lift them a little bit. And as you exhale, hug the sitting bones a little closer together and tuck the tail under. Move back and forth a couple more times. Now with one leg extended, it's asymmetrical, and there's unique and different information here for the pelvic floor. Let's take one more breath. And then bring your right leg in. And let's try that with the left leg. So left leg extends. And we come into that same movement. Notice how it might feel different on this side. So there's a lot of cultural sort of expectations or teachings around the pelvic floor. We can have individual relationships with the pelvic floor that vary. But today our philosophy class is really allowing us to have an individualized exploration of this important area of the body, not necessarily as physical muscles and nerves, not necessarily, the story you've been taught about your pelvic floor from your experiences, but as a reservoir of energy, of Kundalini. Good. Let's take a break. Bringing your knees back together. If you're sitting in a chair, you don't have far to go. But if you're like me, you might appreciate a chance to come back into child's pose and wiggle out your fingers, roll your wrists, just kind of have a break for your hands. So we're going to come back to weight bearing on the hands for a moment. If you're sitting in the chair, you can also take the time to loosen up your joints a little bit in the hands and the wrists. Let's return to our table pose when you're ready and extend the right leg again. So you've already done this side, but we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to move a little bit with your right arm now. So when you're ready to inhale, lift the right arm, turn your chest open to the right, just as far as you can comfortably. And then exhale, wind your hand gently underneath the left. You're going to bend that left elbow a little bit. And then let's try that a few times, winding back and forth. Noticing now how we're bringing a bit of a different movement to the spine, movement that will squeeze, rotate and squeeze the energy up from the pelvic floor. Let's take one more breath. And then we're going to switch arms and notice the difference. So bringing the right hand to the ground now, lift your left arm as you inhale. And then exhale, weave the left arm underneath the right. This could be a lot more awkward. Your range of motion might be quite a bit more restricted. Try it a couple more times. Good. And then we'll move back into table pose, just a neutral position. If you're sitting in a chair, you've got your hands on the wall instead of the ground. And then we'll take the left leg, extend the left leg out, and we're working with the left arm. Inhale, lifting up the left arm. Exhale, sweeping it underneath the right. And whatever direction you're turning to, how much twist you're finding in your back, it's individual and it's perfect the way it is. When we start forcing or pushing our bodies into positions they weren't designed for, then we're going to hold back the flow of that Kundalini. It's going to stay coiled and dormant. So we've got to be moving in a fluid, welcoming way. Let's take one more breath on this side. And then we switch the arms. So left arm down, inhale up with the right arm and float under. So do you notice each time we do a little different side, we shift things around, the sensations change. The movement of the pelvic floor is altered each time we stretch on it in a little bit of a novel and unique way. We're waking it up. We're saying, hello, look what else is going on. We've got a new toy to play with. One more breath, and then we can take a break back into our child's pose. Take a chance to work out your fingers and your wrists. And if you're working with the chair, move to sit right at the front edge of the chair. You might have to come away from the wall a little bit now. And stay with your sitting bones on the edge of the chair so that you don't have to bend your knees too much. For those of us who can bend knees, I'm going to come into Malasana or squat pose. Now I know that I have super tight Achilles tendons and calf muscles. So I need to have height for my heels. So I'm going to fold my blanket a couple times so that I've got some good ridge of blanket to support my heels. This makes this a lot more accessible for me. If you also feel that you can't bend your knees, you don't need to necessarily stay in the chair, but you can't come into full squat, your knees won't like that. What you might want to do is have a chair handy, edge of your couch, and you can come into the squat pose and just hang on to the edge of the couch. So your legs can stay more of a 90-degree angle, not such a deep bend. But if you're okay with a deep bend and you want to try full Malasana, This is where you could come. I'm going to just turn around so I can face you here. So your heels are up on the blanket if you're using a blanket like me, and you're letting your sitting bones drop directly towards the ground. So whether you're sitting on the chair, holding onto a chair, or doing this, your sitting bones are anchored right to the ground. If you don't need your hands, you can place them together at the heart in a prayer-like gesture. And your knees can be in contact with your elbows, knees pulling in towards each other and elbows kind of pushing against the knees. So there's a relationship there. Now let's just take a couple of those breaths that we started with today. Inhaling through the crown to the pelvic floor, and then the trampoline bounces the energy back up to the crown of the head. Try just 2 or 3 of those breaths. Take your time, feeling that sense of expansion on the inhale and the gathering up of energy on the exhale. When you're done with this, we're going to come to forward fold. So I'm just going to rock forward to get rid of my blanket and slowly lift my sitting bones and let my head drop heavy. Now you want to keep your knees quite bent here, show them sideways so you can see that, so that your belly and thighs stay connected. Feel your sitting bones spread apart as you forward fold. Let's come to half forward fold now. So on your next inhale, hands to the thighs, lift your chest, open and expand. Exhale, forward fold. Inhale, half lift. Exhale, forward fold. One more time. Inhale, half lift. And exhale, forward fold. As you come up this time, keep your chest lifted, keep your back straight, come all the way up to your mountain pose to standing. First mountain pose. See if you can take just 2 breaths with the awareness of the breath animating the central channel of the body, getting that Kundalini stimulated and flowing through your spine. Good. From your mountain pose, step towards the back of your mat. And then take a giant step forward with your right foot. As big as you can. Giant step forward with your right foot. Now your 2 feet, you can see with me, I've got a little space between my legs. You can see the wall behind me between my legs. I've kept my feet the same distance apart as they were when they were in mountain pose. So my right knee is bent directly over top of the knee, and the knee's facing out over the toes. My back heel is lifted, my back leg is strong, and my back buttock, my left buttock is engaged and strong. So it's a lot of balance here, and we're going to challenge that balance a little bit more. Take your right hand behind your back, palm facing out. Inhale, lift up through the left arm. As you exhale, a little half moon stretch over to the right. Try that for 2 more breaths. Keep pushing back with your heel to hold your balance. You can always drop your left hand to your hip if your shoulder's sore today. Good. Inhale up. Exhale, release, and step your left foot up to your right foot. Mountain pose at the top of your mat. Relax. Take 2 breaths to encourage, with your intention, the energy of the breath to move up and down the spine. And then move to the back of your mat. We'll step our left foot forward next time. Find that pose on the other side. So I like these side bends. Side bending really awakens the lateral parts of the spine, which tend to be quite dormant on most of us. When you're ready, left hand comes behind you. Inhale up through the right arm. And exhale, angle towards the left. And know you can keep your right arm on your hip, hand on your hip, if your shoulder's a little sore today. Keep the right buttock strong. Keep the heel pushing to the back of your room. Last breath here. And then stepping the back foot up to meet the front foot. Come back to mountain pose. Turning to face the side of your mat. Stepping your feet quite wide apart and turning your toes out. And when you bend the knees, notice that your thigh bones are in the same line as your toes. And when you bend your knees, they stop at right on top of your ankles. You want to try to avoid the knees flopping in towards each other. So you might have to press a little bit more on the outside edges of your feet as you come into goddess squat. So let's do a couple preparatory goddess squats, and then we'll work our Kundalini philosophy into this. So when you're ready, inhale, expand, just like your sitting bones are expanding, and then exhale, squatting and bringing your hands together. Good. Inhale, sitting bones expand, body expands. Exhale, sitting bones contract slightly as you come into the squat. Try that one more time. And then take your hands to your thighs. Inhale, lift up your right arm. And exhale, angle in that half moon to the left. Now come into that a couple more times. Knowing you can keep your right hand on your hip or on your thigh if your shoulder is sore. And see if you can bring awareness to your sitting bones as you do this movement. Let's switch sides. Inhale, lifting up with the left arm, and exhale, angling to the right. So tension in the sitting bone area as you hold this squat for just one more breath. And let's inhale, release the squat, bring your feet into parallel position. You could actually bring your feet so that they're almost pigeon-toed, that your heels are further apart. Your heels are related to the sitting bones. Your feet are related to the sitting bones. We're talking about root chakra. We're talking about earth element. Of course, your feet are what's connected to earth. So what goes on in your feet directly affects your pelvic floor. Talk more about that in our next round of goddess pose. So if you wanted to push your heels apart, that actually widens the sitting bones in your pelvis and allows a better hinge. We're going to come into that forward fold we did a couple minutes ago, but this time from a wide-legged position. You may want a chair seat in front of you or blocks in front of you if that's easier for you to get your hands to the ground. So when you're ready, inhale and lift, expand. Exhale, hinge forward, bringing your hands to the floor, blocks, or the chair seat. Inhale, come halfway up, expand the chest, expand the sitting bones. Exhale, forward fold. We'll do that for 2 more breaths. Pulsing back and forth between the half lift and the full forward fold. And on your next inhale, keep that back flat, keep the heart open and pulling forward and come all the way up. Adjust your feet back so they're ready for goddess squat again. Chest bend your knees. Make sure you have the angle of your feet that relate to the knees in a healthy way. Now this time we'll focus on the ball of the foot, specifically the hallux joint. This is the part of the ball of the foot that's at the base of the big toe. This is also a direct energy line into the Kundalini storage area, if you want to call it that. So we're going to kind of come up onto the ball of the foot, focusing on that hallux joint. So let's give that a try. Inhale, exhale, come into your goddess squat. Now inhale up through your right arm, and as you exhale over to the left, lift up onto the ball of your right foot. And then inhale, come back up. Exhale, lift up onto the ball of specifically that hallux joint on the right toe, right big toe. And we'll do that one more time, massaging that energy point in the foot. Good. And then switching sides, inhaling up with the left arm. And as you exhale, you come up onto the big toe ball on the left foot. We'll do that for 2 more breaths if we can. Remember, your left hand could be at your hip if this is a bit much for your shoulder right now. And on this inhale, release the pose. Spread your heels nice and wide apart. And this time, let's go into forward fold and perhaps hold it for 3 breaths. You can do the pulsing if you want to, your choice. Inhale to elongate the spine, and then exhale, spread the sitting bones, move into forward fold. Let your hands come to blocks, the chair seat, or the floor. And now you've flipped it all upside down. But still see if you can create that breath energy movement from the crown of the head to the pelvic floor on the inhale and bounce it back out the head on the exhale. Last breath here. Good. Now we're getting ready to move towards the front of the mat in lunge pose. So walk your hands around to the front of your mat. You can bring your blocks with you if you like, and you're in lunge pose. Drop the back knee, bring the front leg back to the back leg, and fold down onto your belly. You can bring your hands forward under your forehead to help you rest. Now, what if you don't want to be on your belly right now? Just roll over onto your back. We'll be joining you there in just a few moments. While you're on your back, you could go back to what we were doing at the beginning of class, knees bent, doing a few gentle pelvic tilts, working with the energy of the breath up and down the spine. If you're okay on your belly, take a few deep breaths here. See if you can connect to the energy of the breath flowing up and down your spine as well. We so often think of the spine when we're laying on our backs because you feel the bones, the extra part of bone pushing out from the back of the spine. But the spine is 3-dimensional. It has an anterior or front side too. And when we do prone postures, we become more viscerally aware of the front of the spine. And it's an important part of that conduit of energy. Let's use half locust pose to help us elongate the spine. So can you stretch your arms out in front of you along the floor and extend your legs out long behind you? Keep in mind that bouncing of energy up and down the spine, and try to keep the spine as smooth and open as possible. As you inhale, lift your left leg and your right arm. Pull them away from each other. Exhale, lower down. Inhale, lift right leg, left arm, elongate. And exhale, lower down. Alternate from side to side a few more times. And can you weave in, can you layer in this understanding of the energy of the breath moving from the crown to the tailbone on the inhale, and then back, bouncing back up. And you can even expand that right out to your fingertips and right down to your toe tips. So you're elongating along the whole body with the energy of the breath. Let's do each side one more time. And then we can come back down to the ground, fold your hands under your forehead, give yourself a second to rest. And then carefully rolling over onto your back. So we'll all be back together now on our backs. Take a second to settle. Now you may want to use your yoga strap or scarf here. You don't have to, you could just grab your pant leg. I'm gonna come into half happy baby. It's gonna take one leg, bring the knee in towards the chest. If you can reach down along the inside of your leg and grab the big toe, you can do that. You can grab the inside edge of your foot, or you can just grab the pant leg. I'm going to use my strap, just gives me a little bit more length in my arms, which I need. Bring the knee towards the floor beside your ribs and point the sole of the foot up towards the ceiling. You're creating like a little shelf with your foot facing the ceiling. Keep the other leg bent and the foot on the floor in a comfortable angle. And then go back to awareness of your pelvic floor. Can you feel a bouncy energy in your pelvic floor? Take one more breath. And then let's switch legs. So the knee isn't really towards your chest. The knee is out beside you, coming down towards the floor beside your rib cage. The ankle is in dorsiflexion, and you're pressing the hallux joint, that big toe ball area of your foot. You're pressing that energy point up towards the ceiling. That's another reason I kind of like using the strap, is I can really get that kind of connection there. Take one more breath. And then you can release both feet to the floor. Take a breath to adjust. And then rolling over onto your side, we're going to come to bound angle pose. Now you may find that you're more comfortable sitting in a chair, and you just sit right at the edge of the chair and make the diamond shape with your legs. I like doing this on my block. You could also do this on a bolster, folded blankets. I just find that the firmness of the block really gives me the feedback that's helpful. So whatever prop you've decided to use, let's come up onto the prop. Bring your legs into a diamond shape. If you're sitting like me, your soles of the feet might touch, but if you're sitting in a chair, it might be too awkward to do that. So don't worry about it. And then move the flesh of your buttocks directly back, not out to the sides, but directly back. So I'm going to reach behind me here and take the fleshy parts and move them backwards. This exposes the sitting bones a little bit more. Bring your spine into an upright channel, as smooth and open as you can. If we're slouched or straining, it's going to hold back the flow of that Kundalini energy. You can close your eyes if you like. And another little helpful hint is to drop the chin slightly towards the chest. Not a lot, but just a small angle there will help to quiet the mind. Inhale, feeling the energy of the breath move from the crown to the pelvic floor. And as you exhale, feel the energy of the breath moving back up, bouncing up to the crown of the head. You've been doing that a lot in this practice, so it's probably getting a bit routine. Observe the movement of the sitting bones as they press into your prop, your chair or your block. Now remember, we looked at the bumper bones at the beginning as well. Start to draw the bumper bones together on the exhales as well as the sitting bones. So there's a little drawing in of the low belly as you exhale. A little bit more oomph to it now. And you can stay with this just like it is, or you can go a little faster with your breath if you like. So it sounds a little bit more like this, and it looks a little bit more like this. Relax for a moment, take normal breaths, make sure everything's going okay for you. And when we're doing that really forceful exhale, we're pushing the energy from the pelvic floor up the spinal channel. And we're using a little bit of muscular contraction in the pelvic floor across the low belly to kind of really bounce that back up. It's a bit more of a powerful technique. So if it feels uncertain for you, go back to what we were doing earlier in class where you felt more routine about that. Let's try a round of 11 of those breaths now. You ready? And take a nice deep inhale, even retaining the inhale for a second. And then exhale thoroughly, relax. We might try one more round of that. When you're exhaling, you're actually kind of doing some muscular work down here. You're really thinking about bouncing that energy back up with a little bit of oomph. So there's a contraction in the pelvic floor. Those sitting bones are moving together. There's the bumper bones coming together and the muscles are pushing it back up, the energy back up. So maybe one more round of 11 breaths, beginning now. And then inhaling deeply. You might retain the breath if you want for a second or two. Be a wonderful sense of illumination or lightness when you do that, and then exhale completely. Wonderful. Let's bring the knees closer together and take your prop out from underneath. If you've been using a chair, you might like to join us on the floor again now. I'm going to bring my blanket back the way it was folded earlier. This is going to be good cushioning for me for forward fold here. So hooking the sitting bones over the edge of your blanket, this just gives your spine an opportunity to stay longer and more open. You can also roll a towel or extra yoga mat under your knees. If you know forward folds are really stiff for you these days, do bend your knees, and it's nice to have that support. I'm going to use my strap or my scarf. You don't have to, but I want to see if I can get that connection to the big toe ball again. So the strap allows me to do that. It keeps my feet flexed and I have something to press the ball of the foot against, especially that big toe point. I know that that's a direct energy line into the pelvic floor. That's why I'm kind of working with it. It's not so that I can touch my hands to my feet or pull myself deeper into the pose, but just so that I can get a connection quite easily between my hands and my big toe joints. You can do that with your hands if you're really flexible, but most of us aren't. So inhale, create length in the spine, create space for that Kundalini to rise, and then exhale, angle forward. And then come back up. Let's do this 3 breaths in total. Each time you angle forward, you might come a little closer. And then one more breath up. And then we can hold the forward fold. Do keep your shoulders relaxed, your elbows bent. Angle your chin slightly towards your chest. Be aware of the sitting bones. Now I've kept my ankles in dorsiflexion. I've kept some contact between the big toe mound and the strap or the scarf. So I know where my feet are. I'm very aware of that. And then widen the sitting bones on purpose. Let them spread and soften. Feel the malleable tissues, those wonderful elastic tissues of the pelvic floor responding to your breath, even though you're still. One more breath if possible. And then you can bring your hands to the mat or the floor and help to press yourself back up to an upright position. Let's move on to our back for bridge pose. I'm going to have a block handy. I like to use a block between my knees in bridge pose. I'm also going to give myself some cushioning here with my blanket spread back out in a long rectangle. Now, when we come into bridge pose, we're going to come into it up and down a few times. Think of how that also reverses the flow of natural gravity in your body and encourages that backwashing of Kundalini energy up the spine. So setting up for bridge pose, feet in a parallel position, like they would be for mountain pose, more or less aligned under your knees. Arms pressing into the ground beside you and gaze straight at the ceiling. When you're ready to inhale, press into your feet, lift your hips, and then exhale, lower back down. Notice the movement in the spine, how individual segments of the spine can move apart from their neighbor. There's an undulating quality to this posture that mimics the cobra dance or snake dance. Let's take one more breath. And then release your spine down to the ground. You can remove the block if you were using it. And then lifting your feet one at a time from the floor, hands come onto the knees, gently drawing the knees in towards your chest to stretch out that low back. You may also like the idea of taking the knees in a bit of a circle to massage the low back. I'm going to do 3 breaths in one direction and then switch the direction of my circles. Slow it down, soften the movement. And then let's come into our Shavasana position. So you might just stretch out your legs from here, stretch out your arms, and maybe some other preparations that you know will work well for your body. Basically, we want to take a couple minutes now to find stillness and to allow all muscular effort to ease. So you want to be comfortable enough that you don't have to arbitrarily hold anything in place. Everything can spill out towards the ground. Let's let go of any imagery with the breath for this practice now. Just let your breath be natural, flow in the most organic way. And notice the heaviness of your body as you rest to the ground. It's almost as though you can become, one with the earth. Earth nurtures us, feeds us, grounds us, purifies us. And inherently, you might sense all of that energy as you rest in Shavasana. As you relax, You may notice your body feels heavier and heavier. The density of your body, the heaviness of your body is very present. Can I invite you now to also attune, though, to senses of space and lightness in your body? If you scan throughout your sensations, are you aware of places where you experience a sense of spaciousness or lightness, almost as though you could float away from the floor? And this is the essence, really, isn't it, of our human journey? We are of the earth. We are grounded into the earth element. We are dense bones and muscles and tissues. But we are also light. We are also spaciousness and potential. We're electricity. We're energy. It's the dance between these two seemingly opposites that creates our human experience. And thus the mystery of the Kundalini begins to reveal itself. The brain pretty much explodes when it tries to hold awareness or rationalize out how we could be heavy and dense, but light and spacious and electrical at the same time. But that is your felt sense. That is your human experience. It almost blows the circuits to try to sort it all out intellectually. But in our lived experience, we sense the Kundalini in this dance. And this is what our life is all about. Acknowledging our density, our groundedness, our earthiness, but also knowing that we are light. We are bodies of light. We are beings of light. We have a direct plug-in to infinite light, cosmic light, omnipotent light. But we need to be respectful of our embodiment as well. And that is the role of Kundalini. If you have a little bit more time to rest, this can have the potential to be an extremely powerful practice. And so if you sense you need to rest longer, then please take the time. But the clock is my dictator some days, so I will formally close the class now. If you'd like to join me, I'm going to share the sacred sound of Om, which seems to have the magic properties of kind of bringing everything into balance all on its own. So I'm inhaling now. Namaste. I'm going to stop the recording and I'll unmute everybody.